This week marks the 100th anniversary of the tragic sailing of the RMS Titanic, the supposedly unsinkable luxury ocean liner that struck an iceberg and sank during its maiden voyage in 1912. Because the great ship had been equipped with less than half the number of lifeboats it needed, over 1,500 passengers lost their lives. The anniversary is being commemorated by the launching of Titanic II, a replica of the original cruise ship, which at the time was considered the pinnacle of luxury and opulence. The new ship, while harking back to that bygone era, has been updated to reflect the advancements in shipbuilding technology since then. Titanic II will sail the same route across the Atlantic Ocean, completing the journey that was begun 100 years before. The operators of the luxury vessel have gone to great lengths to track down descendants of the original passengers of the ill-fated Titanic, and have invited a number of them to be special guests aboard this maiden voyage. This is Rachel Smythe reporting for GNN News.
Welcome aboard Titanic II. I'm Captain Miller. I've 20 years of service in the British Royal Navy, and I'm looking forward to my first civilian command. And what a fine vessel she is! Titanic II is a return to a long-lost era. Enjoy the trip.
I'm Elsa Young, your ship's doctor. Should you require medical assistance, please feel free to visit the ship's hospital. Despite what Captain Miller says about returning to the past, I can assure you that our facilities are right up to date.
Hi there, I'm Cole Nesmith, trumpet player and band leader of the Icebergs, our jazz combo aboard Titanic II. We'll be entertaining you with some grand music in the first-class lounge tonight. Drop by if you get the chance.
And speaking of the first-class lounge, I am Isaac Maryland, and I serve up the most delectable rum concoctions for the passengers. If the music is not enough to tempt you, then maybe the promise of my wonderful rum cocktails will.
Very well then. I'm Andrew, your steward. Let me show you to your cabin. So, here we are. Hard to believe that the price of a ticket for first-class passage back in 1912 was $4,700. That would be equivalent to about $50,000 in today's money. Good thing your ticket was complimentary, eh?
First entry, Thursday, April the 11th, 1912. It is difficult to fathom that I'm finally on my way to America. It has cost me nearly all my savings, but I think it will be worth it. I'm sad to be leaving the land of my birth, but with Mother now dead, I no longer feel I belong here.
excuse me, but the purser asked me to deliver this message to you. I'm afraid he didn't tell me who it was from. You look a little pale. Is everything all right?
This is to let you know that I have a challenge for you. You've already found the diary. Good. As you see, there are a number of pages missing. Find those pages, and you'll find out more about the bomb I've placed on board. And you could possibly save the ship. You may wonder why you are the recipient of this note. For now, that is my secret. But trust me, all will be revealed in time. And don't tell anybody about it. I'll be watching you.
Hey! Haven't seen you in the lounge yet. I do hope you'll stop by and sample one of my great specialities. You know, my great-great-auntie was a family servant when the big ship sailed long ago. She survived along with the female members of the family. She swore never to set foot on a boat again. Me? I love being on the water, especially when it's a ship as fine as this one.
Being a young unmarried mother of an illegitimate child, there was nothing but ridicule and scorn for me and my son. I hope that this new country will be more welcoming than the old one was.
Pardon me, but I thought I saw this note fall out of your coat when you walked by.
You're doing well. You found another diary entry. Perhaps there is hope for the new Titanic after all. We shall see. I must repeat, tell no one about the bomb. If you make any attempt to alert the authorities or try to leave the ship, I will detonate it at once. Now, shouldn't you be looking for more diary entries?
Pardon the interruption. I'm just doing some research for my story on the new Titanic. The wireless room of the original Titanic was state-of-the-art for its time. The last message sent was simple and to the point. We are sinking fast. Passengers being put into boats.
William and I were among those ferried out to the mighty Titanic when it paused near Queenstown to pick up our Irish contingent of over 100 passengers. We are all travelling steerage, of course, but my cabin, although small, is clean and comfortable. The sheets have never been slept in and were crisp and fragrant as I tucked William in.
Ah, good to see you again. You know, my grandfather was a child aboard the original Titanic. He was one of the lucky few to survive. Fortunately, this time we've plenty of lifeboats, so even old coots like me wouldn't have to go down with the ship. Of course, I've every confidence the lifeboats won't be needed. My grandfather sailed third class. It's sobering for me to think that a descendant from such humble roots is now in charge of such a magnificent ship. Yet it's good to be reminded of these things now and then.
Tonight, as I sit down to write these words, I feel a sense of control that has been lost in my life of late. I truly believe this will be an unforgettable voyage for us. I found this note with your name on it in the Café Parisien, so I thought I would find you and return it. Good thing you hadn't gone far. Well, I must be off to the ship's hospital. See you later.
You continue to impress me with your observation skills. You've now collected a number of diary entries, and for this I will reward you with a clue about my identity. I am one of the persons you've met and talked to on this ship. So sorry I can't reveal more, but what would be the fun in that? Now, your stateroom is quite luxurious. However, I think it's time you took a trip through the third class.
It's good to see you out and about. I like to take in the good sea air out here. It helps to clear my head before I play. Did I tell you that my great-great-uncle was a musician aboard the Titanic? Unfortunately, he and his bandmates all went down with the ship. It is said that they played to the very end and that their soothing music helped to prevent mass panic. I certainly hope I won't be called upon to do anything like that during this voyage.
second entry, Friday, April the 12th. I made a rather startling discovery this morning. It happened while we were out exploring this great ship. Young William so wanted to visit the top deck and see the open sea. All we had had time to do after boarding yesterday was to eat in the dining room and chat with the other third-class passengers in the general room. So directly after breakfast was served, we went out for a stroll on deck. The wind had a bit of a chill to it, and we've yet to feel the friendliness of spring's welcoming arms. We buttoned up our coats and were quite comfortable. William was so excited when we went aft to the poop deck. We stood at the railing, gazing at the Titanic's monstrous wake. Ireland was no longer visible, and I finally realized that I had seen the last of her shores.
Contrary to popular belief, most people did not go down with the ship when she sank. Instead, most died of hypothermia. They just lay in the water in their life jackets and drifted away. The temperature of the water when the Titanic sank was actually 31 degrees, Fahrenheit of course, because the freezing point of salt water is lower than that of fresh.
were on our way back to our cabin to play cards when I heard a voice from above calling, "Ellie!" I turned to the docking bridge and I got quite a shock. Edward Ashton Jones, the man I thought I would never see again, was waving to me. He quickly made his way down the staircase and, to my great astonishment, threw his arms around me. I was quite embarrassed, especially as he then proceeded to introduce his companion and fiancée, Cassandra Stone. We chatted casually for a few minutes. I explained that William and I are on our way to New York, while Edward told me that he and his American fiancée are to be married soon in Boston.
In contrast to the extreme price of a first-class ticket, a ticket for a berth in third class only cost $150, although that was still a lot of money back in 1912. My great-great-grandmother was aboard this ship. She spent her life savings to sail from Europe to seek her fortunes in America.
I must confess that I was quite ill-prepared for such a meeting. It has brought up a host of feelings I thought I had buried years ago. I must try to put Edward out of my mind. He does not know and has quite obviously moved on with his life. Cassandra seemed most at ease with the splendor of this majestic ship. She, of course, has all the class and breeding that I could never offer him. But as I wished them well and took William's hand to return below deck, I saw something in her eyes that betrayed her pleasant demeanor when she looked at my son. Does she suspect something? I must endeavor to keep a low profile for the rest of our voyage.
This note was on the floor of the general room. It has your name on it. So, here you go. You should probably try to be more careful, though, eh?
So you see, our story goes back 100 years and involves some passengers aboard the original Titanic. While I can't say more just yet, you will come to realize that things are not always what they first appear to be. Meanwhile, I bet you're just dying to know who I am. Well, perhaps I am the good Captain Miller. A captain certainly would have access to anywhere on the ship, including a hiding place for explosives, don't you think? While you ponder on my identity, I suggest you continue your search for diary entries.
Third entry, Friday, April the 12th. This is certainly turning into a memorable cruise. This afternoon, after our lunch in the third-class dining saloon, a steward delivered a note to me. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Edward. He asked me to meet him in the library on C deck. I settled William in for his afternoon nap under the watchful eye of Mrs. Hutchins, my widowed roommate, and made my way up the second-class stairs to the library. At the library door, a moment of panic struck me, and I nearly turned back. But after a few minutes of mental debate, I decided to go ahead with our meeting. Edward was seated in one of the comfortable mahogany chairs. I looked around for his fiancée, but saw that he was alone. Edward stood up and greeted me. We chatted for a while about how grand this ship is, and then he invited me to join him for tea at the Palm Court. I was a bit taken aback by this. Surely he would want to spend his time with Cassandra, wouldn't he? He assured me that she had already made plans with some ladies they had met at dinner the previous evening. Over tea, Edward talked about how he had entered the family business after university. Having spent the past few years in the London office, he would soon be managing their Boston branch after their wedding. He told me how he had met Cassandra at a good friend's wedding just a few months ago.
I discovered this note while I was doing some research in the ship's library. Your name is on it. Are you working on a story too? Well, time to report in. Perhaps I'll see you later.
Quite a social structure aboard the original Titanic, don't you think? People putting on airs, and people who just wished they could. And people with secrets. Speaking of secrets, did you know that the musician Cole Nesmith is harbouring at least one of his own? He has a bit of a criminal past involving explosives work. Kind of puts him on the suspect list, wouldn't you say? Perhaps that's who I am. Of course, the bomb continues to tick. So, best not to tarry.
Did you know that only 3 of the 4 smokestacks of the original Titanic were operational? The 4th was added to make the ship look more powerful, although some legends have it that the Irish workers felt it symbolized good luck, like a 4-leaf clover. Some luck, eh?
Finally, we made our way to the boat deck at the top of the second-class stairs, and he asked me the question I had been dreading. Why had I left Oxford so suddenly, without warning, telling him in the note I had left him not to follow? I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Instead, I said that Mother had been taken ill unexpectedly, and I was needed at home to take care of her. Then he asked about William's father. Where was he? I lied again, telling him that I was on my way to meet him in New York.
Here's an interesting bit of trivia. RMS stands for Royal Mail Steamer. For a ship as luxurious as the Titanic was, it seems strange to think of her as a mail steamer, royal or otherwise.
I'm not sure he believed me, but what else could I say? While we were courting at Oxford, I had never spoken to Edward about how Mother had been a favourite servant of Lord Chamberlain at Idlewood Manor. Nor had I told him that when Lord Chamberlain recognised my love of books and thirst for knowledge, he had so generously arranged for me to attend the finest schools in Dublin and then to study at Oxford. So, although Edward knew I was from Ireland, he was unaware that I was the daughter of a servant woman.
The grand staircases were considered the most luxurious trappings on the Titanic and were intended for first-class passengers only. Today, they provide easy access points for submersibles exploring the sunken wreck, as they deteriorated long ago and only gaping holes remain.
We parted with a warm embrace that lasted longer than I felt comfortable with. I stepped back and left hastily. I couldn't stay any longer. My feelings for Edward were starting to resurface. I can't allow this to happen. I've been guilty of fooling myself once. I can't let it happen again.
Another unsigned note from the purser's office. You do seem to be a popular figure this evening. Perhaps you've a secret admirer.
I'm afraid you have left some clues undiscovered. I suggest you return to some of the places you visited earlier and take a second look. Or you can simply live with the knowledge that because you were not observant enough, Titanic 2 will sink just like its century-old ancestor.
In her day, the Titanic cost $7.5 million to construct, and additional millions to furnish, as you can see by the opulence of these dishes and silverware, even in the Café Parisien.
Fourth entry, Friday, April the 12th. That Cassandra is an ill-bred witch. I do not think I have ever been so humiliated in all my life. I should have known better and trusted my instincts, but instead I allowed myself to believe in her better side. Now I have paid the price.
Every stateroom on the Titanic was equipped with electric lighting and heating. Such amenities were considered quite a luxury at the time.
I still find it hard to believe that even after receiving 6 iceberg warnings that day, Captain Smith continued to sail at nearly full speed.
Cassandra must have been waiting for me, but she pretended it was just a coincidence that we met in the second-class stairway. I should have suspected some trick, but I'm an eternal optimist. Cassandra greeted me as though I was an old friend and insisted we use our chance meeting as an opportunity to get to know each other better.
What a fine day to be out on the water, don't you think? Did you know that the original Titanic design specified 32 lifeboats? The White Star management overruled Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, and reduced that number to 20 because they thought extra boats would make the deck look cluttered. Rather short-sighted, I would say.
She led me to the reception room below the grand staircase. A steward approached me as I entered, but Cassandra shooed him away, saying that I was her guest. The staircase was still crowded with passengers on their way back from dinner. The sheer grandeur of the women in their beautiful dresses and the men in their dinner suits was overwhelming, and I was painfully aware of how my simple attire set me apart from them.
Another message. Whoever keeps leaving these for you is a bit old school, don't you think? Texting would be so much easier.
So you see, a drama unfolds from the past, just as our drama unfolds in the present. Speaking of the present, I wonder if it's possible that I could be your steward, Andrew. He's rather secretive and quiet, just the type you'd expect a mad bomber to be. And as one of the staff, he certainly knows his way around the ship. Yeah, I think that's who I must be. Well, you'll never know as long as there are secrets that remain to be discovered. Tick-tock, tick-tock.
They have newspapers here in the barber shop, just like on the old Titanic. Do you know what the headline in the New York Evening Sun was on the afternoon following the sinking? It was, "All saved from Titanic after collision." Man, they couldn't have been any farther from the truth.
Cassandra told me that she had sailed to Europe as a celebration of her graduation from Smith College. She had been in England a little more than a month when she met Edward at a mutual friend's wedding. It was love at first sight, and theirs had been a whirlwind courtship, she said. I have to admit she was very convincing when she spoke of her love for him, but believing her only drew me deeper into her trap.
Did you know the Titanic was transporting several automobiles in the cargo hold? Too bad she didn't have more lifeboats instead.
She excused herself to go to the powder room. Before she disappeared out the door, I saw her from across the room speaking to a pair of stewards. Shortly thereafter, they approached me. One of them spoke quite loudly and haughtily. "Not sure how you strayed in here, ma'am, but your presence is unwelcome. We'll escort you back to third class."
I wonder if you knew that passengers rode the stationary bicycles in the gymnasium to pass time while the ship was sinking.
I tried to protest that I was waiting for Cassandra, but then I realized that she had set me up for this. "Of course," I answered. "I wouldn't want to contaminate the first class." The stewards saw me to the second class enclosed promenade and wished me a good night. It was all I could do to contain my tears, but then I heard Cassandra's voice from behind me. "I hope you have learned your lesson, Miss O'Sullivan," she said. "Third-class citizens have no place among the first class. Edward is mine. Stay away from him, or you and your bastard child will eternally regret it."
Sad to think that, after a long and distinguished career, the Titanic's captain, Smith, had planned to retire after completing her maiden voyage. Thankfully, I don't plan to retire anytime soon.
Before I could react, she went on. "Oh yes, I know what secret you have been keeping from Edward, and of course you are very wise to do so. Let me give you a well-meant word of advice. Keep your guilty secret locked away, or there will be consequences." Then Cassandra turned and walked away. A raging torment welled inside me. I was about to run after her to give her a piece of my mind when a steward appeared and suggested, "Perhaps Madam will feel more comfortable back in her cabin." I nodded and accepted defeat. Cassandra had got the better of me, and I had walked straight into her trap. But I vow, here and now, it will not happen again.
I believe you left this envelope behind in the wheelhouse. Do be more careful. It's difficult enough keeping track of all the goings-on with the crew, let alone helping you with your personal belongings.
You will note that the author of this diary has now been revealed to be someone named Ellie O'Sullivan. Interesting that you were presented with your ticket for Titanic 2 because you are descended from a survivor named William O'Sullivan. Do you see the connection? While you consider that, I must urge you to research several of your prior destinations, as there are still additional diary entries to be unveiled.
Many people are unaware that the Titanic had a near collision as she left the dock in Southampton. Some considered this to be a bad omen of things to come. Fear not, as you know, our departure was much less eventful.
Fifth entry, Saturday, April the 13th. I am beginning to think that this voyage will be the death of me. I was given such a fright this morning that I am only now beginning to recover. What on earth can Edward have been thinking? After my confrontation with Cassandra yesterday evening, I spent a very fitful night, tossing and turning in my bed.
Even though Captain Smith gave orders that women and children were to board the lifeboats first, a surprising number of them died. Nearly all of them came from the second and third class. Another example of the advantages of being rich aboard the luxury line.
Come this morning, I was a dreadful mess. Mrs. Hutchins saw how exhausted I was and kindly offered to take William to breakfast and afterwards keep an eye on him in the general room so that I could catch up on some sleep. Thankfully, sheer fatigue clouded the thoughts that were racing through my mind, and I drifted off into blissful slumber. When I woke up, It was early afternoon. I was surprised that I had slept so long, but I felt refreshed and eager to go up on deck. However, when I got to the general room, I found Mrs. Hutchins fast asleep in a deck chair, with William nowhere to be seen.
You know, of the 1,523 people that died that night, only about 300 bodies were recovered. The rest, they just floated away. Very sad that the loved ones of most passengers never got to bury them.
I hastily checked to see if William had returned to the poop deck he had enjoyed so much during yesterday's stroll. None of the passengers who were out and about could recall seeing him. I returned to the general room and shook Mrs. Hutchins awake. I was reluctant to do so, as she had been such a dear to me on this trip, but I was beginning to panic. "Oh, Ellie, it's you! How was your nap?" she asked, obviously unaware of my frantic state of mind. "Where's William?" I pleaded. By this time, I was fearing the worst, that he might have wandered off unnoticed and fallen overboard.
Did you leave this in the barber shop? The stylist thought it might be yours.
I wonder if I could be Dr. Elsa Young. Didn't she mention that her great-grandfather was a crewman aboard the Titanic, and one of the lucky few to survive? But did she not add that he did not receive a single penny in compensation from White Star Line for suffering from pneumonia? He never fully recovered and died little over a year after the sinking. Revenge is always a good motive for placing a bomb on board. Anyway, I suggest you continue your search, for the explosives will not wait forever.
Bet you didn't know that the Titanic, when she set sail, was loaded with 40,000 eggs, 75,000 pounds of meat, and 1,000 bottles of wine. As to the amount of rum she had on board, now that's a mystery.
needn't fret, Mrs. Hutchins assured me. That nice gentleman you told me about stopped by and offered to take your son on a tour of the ship. Naturally, little William was over the moon about it. I offered to accompany them, but your gentleman friend assured me that wasn't necessary.
Did you know that the Titanic never held a lifeboat drill? Probably because it was considered unnecessary aboard an unsinkable ship. And besides, they may have all been too busy eating.
I was at the same time relieved and distressed. Relieved that William had not suffered some horrible accident, but distressed to learn that he was in the company of Edward. Of course, I knew him well enough, but as far as William was concerned, Edward was practically a total stranger.
It's funny. Back in the days of the first Titanic, women were forbidden to enter the smoking room. A pretty bad case of discrimination, wouldn't you say? On the other hand, it was women and children first when it came to the lifeboats.
I explained my situation to a friendly steward who agreed to escort me to the first-class decks to look for my son. After a fruitless search of much of the top deck, we finally caught up with the two of them in the gymnasium. William was on the rowing machine, with Edward playing his private coach.
Titanic's maiden voyage was considered a celebrity event. Her passenger list included some of the wealthiest people in the world.
I must admit that I was tempted to give Edward a piece of my mind, but when I saw William's beaming face, I simply couldn't bring myself to show my anger. William excitedly told me all about how they had inspected the foredeck and then gone down to see the luxurious automobiles in the cargo hold that are being transported to America.
I think maybe you dropped this in the galley. It has your name on it.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave. And all that, The Titanic had her secrets, as does Titanic too. And you've yet to uncover them all, so I suggest you revisit some of the places you've been before.
His eyes lit up with joy when he came to the highlight of their tour. The bridge and wheelhouse, where little William O'Sullivan actually met the captain of the Titanic, Captain Smith. Edward even persuaded him to have a haircut at the Titanic's barbershop. I thanked Edward for his kindness and generosity, but then insisted it was time for William to return to our cabin for his afternoon nap. My fury, albeit unspoken, was undiminished. Edward had taken advantage of Mrs. Hutchins' trusting nature and gone off with William without my permission. Edward seemed to sense my annoyance. He avoided my eyes as he took his leave from William, who proudly and happily returned his handshake.
The forward grand staircase featured a large glass dome that provided natural light during the day. It elegantly descended 5 levels from the boat deck to D-deck and was Titanic's centrepiece of style and sophistication for the privileged class.
William, oblivious of my anxiety, literally skipped along as we made our way below deck. As I write, he is dozing peacefully, and I have finally calmed down enough to stop my hand shaking. What am I to do about Edward? I know that I was resolved to keep myself to myself on this voyage, but fate seems determined to bring us together.
I beg your pardon, it's me again. While I was delivering towels to your room, I noticed this note had been left for you. I thought you might like to read it right away.
As the Titanic approached her date with destiny, other destinies were playing out as well, including one between a member of the privileged upper class and one of the pitiable working classes. Will the lovers reunite? But that would be telling. Meanwhile, the countdown to detonation continues, and so too must your search, if you wish to save the ship.
While the menus for dinner in the saloons were fixed, the a la carte restaurant had a much larger selection. Some passengers called this dining room the Ritz.
Sixth entry, Saturday, April the 13th. This trip becomes more emotionally confusing with each wave that our mighty ship plows through on our way to America. Tonight, as a result of what happened this evening, I find myself more torn than ever.
Even though it's well known that the Titanic was short of lifeboats, it's perhaps even more tragic that nearly 500 seats aboard the existing lifeboats were unoccupied.
William and I enjoyed our dinner in the third-class dining saloon and then retired to our cabin. Mrs. Hutchins returned with an invitation to join many of the other third-class passengers for some cheerful Saturday evening entertainment in the general room. There would be much merriment, drinking and dancing. But frivolous entertainment was the last thing I needed at that particular moment, so I politely declined.
The Titanic's top speed was 23 knots. She had 29 boilers feeding steam to her engines. Of course, speed was a major part of the problem. Had she been cruising at a much slower speed, she might have been able to avoid the iceberg.
After William drifted off to sleep, I settled down with a book, trying to distract my mind from thoughts of Edward. I must have dozed off, for the next thing I can remember was a quiet tap on the cabin door.
Did you happen to leave this envelope while you were visiting the ship's hospital facilities? It has your name on it.
Unfortunately for you, you missed a few clues. I suggest you go back and take another look at a few places.
When the ship struck the iceberg, it was 11:40 p.m. Most passengers were fast asleep in their cabins and didn't even notice the collision. Maybe it would have been for the best if the crew had not wakened them. At least they would not have had to deal with the panic of the people trying to get aboard the woefully inadequate number of lifeboats.
I thought it might be Mrs. Hutchins returning from her night out, but much to my surprise, Edward was standing at the door. He looked so magnificent in his tailor-made dinner jacket that it nearly took my breath away.
Part of the reason it took the Carpathia so long to reach the Titanic was because she was doing a sensible 9 knots through the iceberg-laden waters. The Titanic had been cruising at 22.5 knots, just under her maximum speed.
In a low voice, he asked me if he could come in, and I ushered him inside, quickly closing the door to drown out the sounds of the wild party still going on above. Edward looked down at William's contentedly slumbering face and gently brushed aside a strand of hair that had fallen across his forehead. Then he turned to me.
The forward grand staircase featured a large glass dome that provided natural light during the day. It elegantly descended 5 levels from the boat deck to D-deck and was Titanic's centerpiece of style and sophistication for the privileged class.
I know, Ellie, he said simply. Why did you not tell me the truth? I looked at William. It struck me immediately that with his new haircut, he resembled his father more than ever. "Oh, Edward!" I stammered and collapsed tearfully into his arms. And then it all came pouring out in a flood of confession. The truth about my working-class family. The lies I had told at university in an effort to be accepted in a world that was so totally foreign to me. And finally, my shame upon discovering that I was pregnant with his child.
Perhaps I'm looking in the wrong place for an angle on my Titanic 2 story. So far, this voyage seems rather dull and uneventful. By the way, I think you must have dropped this note. I found it by the grand staircase.
How strong is a father's love, especially when the father has only recently discovered that he is one. Perhaps we will find out, but not if you don't locate the missing diary entries. You should return to some of your previous locations and take another look.
With a shaved head like mine, I visit the barbershop on Titanic 2 a lot.
Don't you understand? We move in completely contrasting social circles. At Oxford, I was a foolish girl, trying to delude myself that I could be a part of your world. I couldn't bring myself to burden you with my mistake, and thus disgrace you and your family. He tenderly brushed my tears away. My sweet Ellie, William is not a mistake. He is a blessing I would gladly have shared with you.
Did you know that the wreckage of the Titanic was found 12,500 feet below the surface and about 350 miles southeast of Newfoundland? Its two sections were found nearly 2,000 feet apart and facing in opposite directions. Debris was scattered over an area of 1 square mile.
I looked into his eyes and saw profound sadness. He took a deep breath and said, "It pains me to know that you have had to live with the secret for so long. And it breaks my heart to think that you even suspected that I would regard the child you were carrying as a disgrace. Oh, Ellie, I loved you then, and I'm still in love with you now." "But what about Cassandra?" I asked.
You know, the Titanic was 882 feet long and displaced over 46,000 tons. Of course, she would be dwarfed by the massive cruise ships that sail the oceans today.
Cassandra is a social climbing schemer, and I suspect not nearly as wealthy as she claims, he said. The truth is, she more or less forced me into our engagement by wheedling her way into my parents' affection. Father pressured me by making our engagement a condition for taking over the directorship of the Boston branch. The longer this voyage lasts, the more I realize I have betrayed my principles. What I truly desire is to have you, and now William, in my life, and to hell with what my family or anyone else may think.
The Titanic lay on the ocean floor for 74 years before it was rediscovered on July the 14th, 1986, by an oceanographic research team led by Dr. Robert Ballard. I wonder what went through his mind when his probes came upon the wreckage.
Edward then asked me to stay with him when the ship arrives in New York. Should his family decide to disown him for this indiscretion, he said he has sufficient funds to look after the three of us while he seeks alternative employment. I told him that I could not make such a decision spontaneously, that I would need time. He agreed that I should take the time I needed to think things over. We embraced, and this time I was reluctant to let go. Now he is gone, and Mrs. Hutchins has returned from the festivities, flushed with an alcoholic glow. She fell asleep almost the moment her head hit the pillow, whereas I am once again unable to rest. Will I ever get a good night's sleep on this voyage?
The ship seems a little bit quiet, don't you think? A little excitement might be just the thing to liven things up. Oh, by the way, I found this in the barber shop. I think you left it behind.
As you see, the reunited lovers plan to reveal their secret. Too bad there were not any tabloids back then to report such a scandal. Speaking of reporting, what about the possibility that my identity is Rachel Smythe? A nosy reporter with well-nigh unlimited access to the ship. And a bomb on board. That's tailor-made for a headline. What a great scoop that would be for her. While you ponder that thought, think about how cold the water is this time of year. The timer continues its countdown.
Contrary to most disasters, which don't differentiate between rich and poor, this one did. The largest percentage of passengers who survived came from first class.
7th entry, Sunday, April the 14th. This journey continues to provide challenges that test the limits of my wits. Today I was determined not to repeat the events of yesterday, so I made sure that I didn't let William out of my sight the whole morning. After breakfast, we went to Mass in the dining room, where I made the acquaintance of a pleasant young lady called Edwina Trout.
The Turkish baths were another place meant strictly for the use of first-class passengers. To enter, you had to purchase a ticket for about $1.
Winnie, she insisted I call her that, took a particular liking to William. He is naturally curious, and she is a school teacher, so it was not surprising that they got on so well. After Mass, she presented us with a wonderful opportunity. She had befriended one of the dining room stewards, who had offered to escort on a tour of the Titanic's cavernous engine room when he was off duty, and she invited us along. William's eyes lit up with excitement at the prospect of seeing the ship's gigantic engines, so we readily agreed.
The Titanic prided itself on its luxuries. The heated indoor swimming pool was a first for any sailing vessel.
was an illuminating experience. I was unaware of the tremendous amount of manpower required to stoke the boiler furnaces that supply the heat for the mighty steam engines. Many of the stokers are countrymen of mine, but I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised to hear this. Irish men and women have for centuries broken their backs in menial labor for the privileged aristocrats. It was during our tour of the final boiler room that William slipped and fell down the gantry stairs. Thankfully, he didn't fall on his head or cut himself, but he did severely twist his right ankle. His heart-rending screams of pain and the flood of tears were unbearable.
You still haven't stopped by for a drink, and from the looks of things, you could maybe use one. Anyway, this note was left for you in the lounge after you left, so I thought you might like to see it.
I think you'll want to go back and take another look at a few of the places you looked at earlier. You seem to have overlooked a couple of diary entries.
Food that was prepared in the galley had to be stored in the Titanic's refrigeration units. There were a number of different rooms to accommodate meats, cheese, fish, game, poultry, wines, spirits, and champagne, all of which had to be maintained at separate temperatures ideally suited to each type of item.
Winnie and a steward friend helped to carry William to the ship's hospital, where a kindly doctor treated him. We spent much of the afternoon there with his ankle wrapped in ice to reduce the swelling. Winnie was so kind, staying with us for several hours. Eventually, I asked her to go to our cabin to tell Mrs. Hutchins what had happened to us. I didn't want her to worry, or even worse, ask the crew to search for us. To my surprise, Edward visited us about 20 minutes after Winnie had departed.
On the night the ship sank, the second-class passengers could choose from a menu of baked haddock with spicy sauce, curried chicken, spring lamb, or roast turkey. At least their stomachs were happy when they went down.
He explained that he had arrived at our cabin just in time to hear Winnie tell Mrs. Hutchins the news of William's injury, and he immediately offered his support. William perked up at once on Edward's arrival. It was so wonderful to see the two of them get along so well. His face lit up when Edward gave him a present, a stuffed bear from the ship's gift shop. Shortly after this, the doctor decided that the swelling on William's ankle had gone down sufficiently for him to be discharged. Edward insisted that we first visit the a la carte restaurant, where he treated our son to his first ever French ice cream.
bar in the smoking room opened at 8 a.m. and closed at 11:30 p.m. Even back then, the White Star Line appealed to passengers to observe moderation, though I doubt many observed this rule on the night of the sinking.
Afterwards, we returned to our cabin and William settled in for a much-needed nap. Mrs. Hutchins was still trying to sleep off a headache from last night's revelry. Edward motioned for me to join him in the passageway, where he asked in a lowered voice if I had considered his offer from last night. I replied that with all the fuss about William's injury, I had not yet had time to think things through. But the concerned look on Edward's face told me what I really wanted to know. He really loves me, and I have never stopped loving him. Throwing caution to the winds, I agreed. William and I will go with him when the Titanic docks in New York City.
On the night of April the 14th, the passengers eating in the first-class dining room had a choice of 4 desserts: Waldorf pudding, peaches and chartreuse jelly, chocolate and vanilla eclairs, or French ice cream. Hard to resist not trying them all, I would think.
Edward smiled and said that all that was needed now was to break the news to Cassandra, which he promised to do after dinner this evening. I begged him to give her the chance to make a dignified exit from his life. After he left, I went up on deck for some fresh air and to write these words. When I started this voyage, I was filled with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty about what the future might bring for William and myself. Now I am so excited, knowing that my beloved Edward and I will be reunited and that my son will finally have a father.
Are you sure you're feeling all right? You look a bit pale. Maybe it's just the light in here. Oh, I almost forgot. This was lying on the counter in the galley. I assume you mislaid it.
You visited all these dining areas, and yet you seem to have lost your appetite. If only you knew where that bomb was. I suggest you check back in a few places you previously visited.
The Titanic's great boilers required a lot of heat, which was provided by Irish labourers working in the furnace rooms in the ship's lowest levels. They shovelled over 800 tons of coal. every single day.
Eighth entry, Sunday, April the 14th. Tonight at dinner, I received a handwritten note. It was from Edward asking me to meet him at the Turkish baths on E-deck. I admit it seems rather a strange place to meet, but I imagine that he doesn't want us to be seen by Cassandra.
All the passengers in steerage were inspected by the hospital staff on the Titanic. They were checked for lice and any sign of infectious diseases like tuberculosis. Little did they know that lice were the least of their worries.
I am so looking forward to dropping this pretense. Never again will I have to hide my feelings or worry about what Edward's hoity-toity so-called friends might think. Edward and I are destined to be together. Our surprise meeting on this voyage has proved that.
First Officer Murdoch gave the order "reverse engines" when he saw the iceberg. But that, in effect, is what doomed the ship. The Titanic did turn more quickly, but actually with greater forward momentum. She most likely would have missed the iceberg had she just turned without trying to reverse her engines.
Mrs. Hutchins seemed in much better spirits after dinner. I told her about Edward's note. She encouraged me to listen to my heart. After a few minutes on deck to get some badly needed fresh air, she has just come back in time to look after William while I go to meet my beloved Edward. I sang his favourite lullaby, and by the last "Tooraluralai," he was fast asleep. I am so glad to see him sleep so peacefully after the disastrous day he had. He seems to have endured his injury with great resilience. If only all our wounds would heal so easily. As I write these words, impatiently waiting for the appointed hour of my meeting with Edward, I am filled with gratitude to this ship of dreams, for it has allowed me to find my own dream.
As a precaution, I'm ordering the ship's speed down to 6 knots. Can't be too careful in these waters. Oh, and I discovered this on a gantry in the engine room. You must have dropped it.
So you see that the past reveals a love that ascends the restrictions of social class. But is it truly love, or just a fantasy on the part of a social climbing gold digger? Only time will tell. By the way, has it occurred to you that I might be your friendly bartender, Isaac Maryland? Well, as one of the hired staff, he would have access all over the ship. And don't you think that happy-go-lucky demeanor might be a cover for something? Well, be that as it may, if you want this ship to see the light of another day, then I suggest you resume your search.
Explorers found one of the purser's safes in 1987, but it contained only a few coins. Some people suggest that another safe, full of priceless jewels, is yet to be found.
Ninth entry. Sunday, April the 14th. How fascinating it is to read the confused thoughts of this foolish woman. Did she honestly believe that she could derail the plans I've made for Edward and myself? She should never have gone so far. I might have allowed Edward to carry on his misguided affair with her if it made him happy. I have absolutely no doubt I would have enjoyed his undivided attention once I became pregnant with his legitimate child. Never mind. That little distraction has now been taken care of. My plan to lure the Irish woman to the Turkish baths worked perfectly. It was a simple matter to compose a note in Edward's handwriting, though I must admit that having to adopt such an intimate tone was rather sickening. He has never called me beloved. However, with her out of the way, he will soon come to treat me with such affection. When Edward announced his foolish intention to go back to his whore, I knew that I had to act quickly and decisively. If he thought I would simply accept his decision, he was sorely mistaken.
Did you know that over 3,000 bags of mail went down with the ship? I wonder what secrets those lost letters might hold.
There is far too much riding on our impending marriage for me to just let him go. Fortunately, at dinner, I was able to persuade dear Mr. Guggenheim to engage him in conversation in the smoking room. With Edward otherwise occupied, I was free to execute my plan. A few well-placed bribes to friendly stewards ensured that not only would the note be delivered to that pitiful woman Eleanor, but also that the Turkish baths would be accessible long after they were closed for the evening, thus ensuring that she would arrive there in gullible anticipation of a secret rendezvous with her beloved Edward. The look of astonishment on her face when she realized that she'd been tricked and that it was I who had maneuvered her into this meeting was simply priceless. I was sorely tempted to gloat at how easily she had been manipulated, but I could not indulge myself, for my deception was not yet complete. I still had to gain her trust in order to deliver my final blow. As she turned to go, I pleaded with her to stay. "Ellie, wait. I only want to talk to you. I'm sorry. It was wrong of me to treat you so badly."
Ironic, isn't it? The lookouts in the crow's nest did not have binoculars. You'd think that they would have thought to bring a pair up with them. The night the Titanic struck the iceberg, there was no moon and the sea was very still. Had the water been less calm, waves would have broken around the base of the iceberg, which would have made it easier for the spotters in the crow's nest to see it from afar, even without binoculars.
She hesitated, uncertain how to react, and I continued, "I know Edward will be happy with you. If you could tell me more about your previous relationship with him, it would perhaps help me to get over my disappointment." The poor girl was so deluded that she easily fell for my feigned interest. As she explained her pathetic story, I did my best to express sympathy for her plight. With each passing moment, I could feel her lowering her guard. Finally, she broke down in tears, which gave me the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I managed to calm her down, and then I opened a bottle of wine I'd brought with me and poured 2 glasses for us. I took a long drink from mine and urged her to do the same. She drank greedily from her glass, then wiped the tears from her bloodshot eyes. She said that the wine tasted somewhat bitter. I agreed that the Merlot was a rather unfortunate vintage. Of course, what she did not realize was that I had dissolved a large dose of strychnine in her drink. I had obtained the poison earlier in the evening from one of the stewards. The crew uses it to keep down the number of rats on the ship, and it was easy for me to slip some into her glass. The poor girl continued to drone on for several more minutes before the poison began to work. Eventually, she complained she was feeling dizzy.
This was left for you in the mail room. As usual, nothing to reveal who it is from.
The course of history cannot be altered, and as you see, this diary now has a new author. More is to be revealed, but you'll need to return to some previous destinations to find additional diary entries.
I see you finally came to your senses. Here's your drink. It's on the house. You look like you could use it pretty bad. You know, Titanic had nothing like a cocktail bar or pub, but you could order spirits in most of the first-class public rooms.
I urged her to lie down on one of the lounging chairs. She began to twitch and convulse as the poison spread. Soon her body was rigid and motionless, though she was still conscious, and it was at that moment that she must have realized that she had been deceived, for her eyes stared at me in fearful desperation. "I warned you once, and you chose to ignore me," I said. Then I delivered my final words to her. "Edward is mine. You didn't really think I was going to give him up for a working-class strumpet like you, did you?" A quick search through her handbag revealed this diary. How convenient. It supplied me with a large sample of her handwriting. My final act was to divert attention from me by forging a despairing suicide note to explain why she had taken the poison. I tore the note from the diary and placed it in her hand. She tried to speak, but all that came out were hoarse, incomprehensible sounds. I carefully removed my own wineglass and bade her farewell, taking with me this fanciful collection of confused ramblings, which, like Edward and his fortune, now belong to me. In the morning, the crew will discover the body. Miss Eleanor O'Sullivan. Verdict: suicide. Her depression was brought on by her inability to support her young son. What will surely make her death even more tragic is the discovery her son William was suffocated in his sleep, apparently by his inconsolable mother. As soon as the ship settles down for the night, I will slip into third class and take care of that final detail. P.S. Moments ago, a harsh scraping sound reverberated throughout the ship. The gigantic ship shuddered, and now the engines have suddenly ceased their steady rhythm. I must go and see what has happened. Perhaps Edward knows what the problem is.
There were large panels of blue and green tiles that lined the walls of the Turkish baths, which were found to be relatively intact when discovered by submersibles in 2005. They even found the frames of a few lounge chairs.
10th entry. Monday, April the 15th. How ironic that all my schemes were for naught. Fate obviously had different plans in store for me. I am now sitting on board the Carpathia, having been rescued after a long, freezing night in a lifeboat. As I chronicle last night's events, it still seems inconceivable that I actually watched the mighty, unsinkable Titanic descend to a watery grave on her maiden voyage. Edward met me as I was making my way to the first-class lounge to find out why the ship had stopped dead. He explained that the unthinkable had happened. The Titanic had struck an iceberg and was taking on water fast. The crew members had begun the procedures for abandoning ship, and the lifeboats on the upper deck were being readied for use. My plan to eliminate the Irish whore's little boy came to nothing. Edward insisted on escorting me to the top deck, where we found a long line of passengers queuing up. Edward instructed me to board the next available lifeboat.
In keeping with the customs of the time concerning modesty, the swimming pool was reserved for women only from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and for men only from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m.
I admit I was becoming increasingly frightened, but when I asked Edward for some words of comfort, he made it perfectly clear that he was only intent on rescuing his lover and her bastard child. Despite my protests, he quickly disappeared into the milling throng on deck. As I waited for my turn to board a lifeboat, I overheard a wealthy couple speaking about the jewellery that they had deposited in the purser's safe. The husband assured his wife that he would retrieve the gems and return to give them to her. I realised that I should do the same, and I hurriedly made my way to the purser's office on sea deck, where another long queue of similarly concerned passengers had formed. I waited in vain for probably 15 minutes before it became obvious to everybody that the purser had abandoned his post.
I believe you left this behind in the Turkish baths. The steam must have unsealed the envelope, but I assure you I did not look at it.
And so, as the diary's new author reveals, the Titanic's tragic collision with the iceberg has occurred. And Cassandra's betrayal is revealed. How will it all play out as the great ship begins her inevitable journey to the bottom of the Atlantic? There are only a few entries left. But to retrieve them, you'll need to revisit some of your earlier hiding places.
Did you know that the Titanic was never actually christened? The White Star Line didn't participate in such practices. Perhaps a little champagne on ice against the hull before she sailed might have brought her better luck.
Reluctantly, I returned to the open deck. Several of the lifeboats had already been launched, and I realized I couldn't afford the luxury of giving up my place in the queue again. It was during this second wait that Edward caught up with me. He was carrying the bawling little bastard in his arms. "Where is she?" Edward screamed at me in a rage I had never seen in him before. I feigned ignorance. "She? You mean your whore? How on earth should I know?" With one hand still cradling the boy, Edward seized me by my life jacket. There was uncontrollable fury in his eyes. They burned with hatred. "When I fetched William from his cabin, Mrs. Hutchins told me that Ellie had received a note, supposedly from me, and had gone off to meet me. This has your evil, scheming hand written all over it, Cassandra."
I guess that phrase, "the mail must get through," was on the minds of the Titanic's 5 postal workers. They attempted to save 200 bags of registered mail, even as the mailroom was filling with seawater. This effort no doubt cost them their lives. That is some dedication.
He raised his hand to strike me, but before he could do so, a man stepped between us to stop him. Edward knocked him flying across the deck with a swift right hook. I gasped in fear, for I had never known that he was capable of such violent behaviour. He turned to me again. "I will ask you one more time, Cassandra, and if you will not tell me, then I swear by all that is holy, I will throw you overboard and leave you at the mercy of the icy waters." I was petrified. "Very well, I will tell you, though it won't help you in the least to know what happened. Your whore is in the Turkish baths. I tried to talk to her, but she was in a fearful state of depression. Who knows what she may have done to herself?" He stared at me for a moment. He must have deduced what I was hinting at. But instead of striking me, all the rage seemed to drain from his eyes, to be replaced by resigned melancholy. "I must go to her," he said. With that, he turned to a young woman in the crowd and cried out, "Who will save this helpless boy?" The woman opened her arms for the boy, and Edward handed him, still crying inconsolably, into her safekeeping. The young woman immediately climbed aboard one of the collapsible lifeboats, and it was lowered away. Edward turned to me one final time and said, "Lord have mercy on your dark soul, Cassandra." Then he spun on his heel and vanished among the panicking crowd. I never saw him again.
You probably are aware that only 1/10 of an iceberg's mass actually floats above the waterline. This makes it considerably more massive than it appears. Even a ship as large and as fast as the Titanic would have made little impression on an iceberg.
I eventually made it onto lifeboat number 4 and found myself sitting beside the young wife of John Jacob Astor. We watched in stunned silence as, less than half an hour later, the mighty Titanic broke apart and slipped silently beneath the waves. The night air was filled with the wailing of women and children crying for their lost husbands and fathers, while somewhere in the night I could hear the desperate cries of those unfortunate souls who had managed to jump off the sinking ship and were now drifting helplessly in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. We pleaded with our crewman to turn back, but he refused to do so, fearful that the survivors would swamp our boat in their panic. Eventually, the distant cries fell silent, and we huddled together to await rescue. After what seemed like an eternity, the sun came up and heralded the arrival of the Carpathia, which had been steaming towards us throughout the long night. The Carpathia's crew has been doing their best to look after us, but the news filtering through is very grim indeed. Barely 700 passengers made it onto the pathetically insufficient number of lifeboats.
This ticket just arrived for you. But I can't imagine why the steam baths would be open at this time of night.
So, now you know the whole story. You are descended from the ill-fated lovers Edward Ashton Jones and Eleanor O'Sullivan. But what you still do not know is who I am. As was the case 100 years ago, the key to everything can be found in the Turkish baths.
Very good. You've discovered the location of the explosives, and now I am revealed as your nemesis. Are you surprised? And have you deduced the other secret, cousin? Yes, that's right. You and I are cousins, descended from the bloodline of Edward Ashton Jones. You see, 8 months after the Titanic sank, Cassandra Stone gave birth to an illegitimate son, Trenton. That man was my grandfather. And you, as you know from your presence here on Titanic 2, are descended from William O'Sullivan. Edward was the father of both Trenton and William, for all the good it did them. Cassandra tried to establish that Edward was the father, and laid claim to his legacy, but to no avail. And William's connection to his father was never established by the orphanage he was raised in. So Edward's fortune has been kept in trust for 100 years. Had I not recently discovered the diary of Ellie O'Sullivan, among the personal effects of my great-grandmother, who is long since deceased, that money might have continued to remain unclaimed. But now, with the information in the diary clearly establishing Edward's relationship with Cassandra, as well as with Ellie, we'll be able to verify our relationship to him and collect the inheritance. Of course, there is one small problem for you. I've no desire to share the fortune. Therefore, you must be eliminated. And that will happen when you fail to defuse this bomb. I'm impressed. You managed to neutralize the explosives after all. Your puzzle skills are quite remarkable. It seems a pity to have to resort to a simple gunshot to do away with you. But you've left me no...
Hands up, Andrew. Your game is over.
No! I was so close to the fortune. If I can't have it, neither will you!
Welcome back to the land of the living. You had a close shave. Mr. Nesmith shot Andrew in the arm and the bullet just grazed your head. Not to worry though, I've bandaged it up and in a few weeks you'll be good as new.
On behalf of the passengers and crew, I would like to extend our thanks to you for saving the ship. And I've been authorized by the cruise line to offer you unlimited sailing aboard any of our ocean liners. Congratulations.
Well, well. Looks like there was a story here after all. You are a hero, and I'm going to make sure the world knows about it.
Sorry that I couldn't reveal to you sooner that I am an agent for Interpol, but that would have blown my cover. I've been tracking the mysterious bomber for some time. Unfortunately, I couldn't be certain it was Andrew Stone until he revealed his intention to kill you. But he's no longer a threat now. As Andrew stated, the diary of Ellie O'Sullivan establishes your relationship to Edward Ashton Jones. And with Andrew certain to spend the rest of his life behind bars, you are the sole inheritor of Edward's Trust Fund.
My, this is quite a cause for celebration. It's not every day someone saves a famous cruise ship from sabotage and learns they are an heir to a fortune. I say it's time for rum cocktails all round and on the house.